Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 234. On this episode of the podcast, Jenn talks with Rachel Stewart about how to be an unqualified success at work. Maybe it's just me, but I'm not clear on the point of advice on how to be unqualified at something. Doesn't that just happen naturally?
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jenn is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to CareersbyJenn.com and click on support to learn more. Hey friends, thanks for tuning in today. Have you ever felt like you were unqualified? Have you ever felt like an impostor and like you weren't really ready to do whatever it was you were asked to do or invited to do? Well, my guest today, Rachel Stewart, was just that person. She started out as an unqualified office manager in a company she didn't know anything about, doing work that she had never done before. But over the last decade, she's actually become the executive vice president of that company called Titan Restoration in Arizona. And she is here to tell us about her story, about her risk-taking, about how she went about to take her unqualifications and turn them into an unqualified success. Rachel is a speaker, she is an author, and she has a lot to teach us in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it. Take a listen. So Rachel, I'm going to start with a question today, and I'm going to ask, what is an unqualified success?
So an unqualified success is somebody who, when they began their journey, was completely unqualified for the work that they were about to do. And they decided to do it anyway. And in that process, found success.
Okay, so I think I've done that a number of times, and I know you have too. Can you give us an example?
Sure. So I'll just give a little bit of history about myself, and then it will help your audience kind of know the gist of where I'm coming from. So I was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of years back in 2008 during our Great Recession in the U.S. My husband got laid off from work, and we were upside down in our house. We lost half of our home value overnight, and we were in a pretty tough situation. So I made the decision, we kind of made the decision together that I would go back to work, and it kind of happened. It was really divine intervention, I feel like. But I went back to work, and I got a job as an office manager and bookkeeper for a restoration contractor. And now I had no experience managing anybody's books, nor was I ever an office manager. So absolutely unqualified for this career that I was about to embark on. But they took a chance on me. And what I did sell them was, I may have never done this job before, but you won't find somebody who will work any harder. I'll outwork anybody. And if I can't figure it out, I will find a way to figure it out. So that was good enough for them. And we were just a really small company. We were actually operating out of a little farmhouse, and we had a bunch of folding tables in a kitchen set up. And it was just, three of us. And we just had like just a really rudimentary beginning. So I would say even the company itself was an unqualified success. But the product that we were offering was fantastic. And I think the bare bones of the company, the integrity and a lot of that, and we had just people who were really passionate about what we were doing. And over the course of the next 11 years, we built a really fantastic, great company that is a leading restoration contractor in the country. And we've won several national awards. We have a lot of notoriety and stuff from the success that we've had. So, and in that process, my career went from office manager to bookkeeper to operations manager. Then I took a general manager position and eventually an executive vice president role. And so was unqualified for every single one of those roles, and just kind of learned on the job.
So that's a pretty incredible story to go from office manager to executive vice president without, as you say, without being qualified or having experience doing that. What was it in the way you sold yourself, do you think, that made the person or the people interviewing you take that chance?
Well, I think for one, I was really honest with them about where my skills were today, but I was really, I guess persuasive in where I thought I could go with the position and the opportunity. And I've done so many interviews over the years, hiring people into our company. And really, that's the thing that sticks out the most to me. Like, I don't really care about your qualifications and your resume. Yes, those are good bonuses, but what I really care about is who you are as a person and what your work ethic is and the kind of drive and motivation that you have, your ability to solve problems. So that's really kind of what I sold in myself, and that's kind of what I looked for in other people, because the rest of the stuff, the technical stuff, I can train. I can't train those characteristics.
So how do you assess those characteristics? Because I'm curious, as a person who hires people, I'm curious, and I mean, I've spoken with a lot of employers over the years and heard a lot of what they have to say, and I think a lot of them agree with what you have to say. But what are some of the things that you look for to be able to assess what you're talking about here? Because some people can tell a good story, but then when you hire them, they don't end up doing what they say they can do.
That is true. So what I really try to get is examples. So if somebody's trying to sell me that they're a great problem solver, I'm like, okay, give me the biggest problem that you had to solve in the last 90 days and how you went about it. And usually something like that, where they have to give a concrete example, it's really hard to make something like that up on the fly. And then when I go and do their references, I make sure that I'm asking those same questions, like, hey, they mentioned that they were able to solve this problem. Can you speak to that at all? And I think references are a huge tool that we're using a lot, because you're right, people can say a lot of things in interviews.
So that's a very key point for the listeners. If they're getting prepped for an interview and they're thinking up examples, I teach an interview course, and I talk a lot about practicing those examples and those kinds of questions and being ready with concrete stories about what happened and how you solved it, etc. And I think that's excellent for people to hear, is that you actually check those stories so that they're not just making something up. And most people wouldn't, but I think it's good to know that these stories will be followed up on, the ones they use as an example.
For sure. And I think, making sure that whoever it is that you're giving references on has enough experience with you and has been around you enough to be able to testify to some of those things that you're going to speak to in your interview.
Absolutely. So when you first started and you'd never looked after anybody's books before, what were some of the tools and resources that you used to equip yourself to do the job?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about the characteristics I feel like you need to become an unqualified success in my book. But one of the first things that I think you have to start with is a mindset. And a mindset is that if somebody else can know it, I can know it too. And there's nothing that is beyond my capacity to learn. And so if you go into it with that kind of confidence, I think that really helps. And so the very first thing I talk about is your mindset and your belief, and the thoughts that you think are really powerful tools in getting the results and the outcome that you want. So I would first start there. And then I'm always hungry for growth. So for me, I had to learn how to understand a P&L, how to understand, we were using QuickBooks at the time. So I took every kind of tutorial and watched every YouTube thing that I could get my hands on. Okay. And I learned everything I could about reconciling a bank account and, you know, how to manage a P&L, what a balance sheet means, all of those kind of things. So just being really hungry for growth and learn. And we live in a day and age where we have so much access to information. We actually have over access to information, but you can get your hands on just about everything. So just being willing to like spend some time and dig and take a look at things. So being hungry for growth, continuing to learn, and then not being afraid to fail or and dealing with fear. I talk about that a lot in my book too, is dealing with fear and failure. And that is part of any unqualified journey. And so unless you are somebody that is totally complacent with where you are in your life and have no desire to grow, you are going to face fear and failure in your journey. And so coming to terms with that and knowing how to deal with those things, I give a lot of good, useful tools and exercises that people can build up their capacity to deal with those two, what people consider negative situations, fear and failure. And then having a lot of grit, just being able to like hang in when things are tough and things aren't necessarily going your way. And, you know, just being able to stay in that discomfort has been super valuable for me.
How do you, I did an interview a few years ago with a woman who teaches all about the impostor syndrome. And how do you battle with that?
I would first start with saying that almost every successful person that I know has a healthy dose of that imposter syndrome. So one, recognizing that you are not alone in that and helps a lot. It has helped me to realize that I'm not the only one who's feeling like I'm in over my head. Like all of these people who have been successful at one point have felt the same thing. So recognizing that this is also universal and I think is healthy, right? It's healthy for us to even have those feelings to begin with. I think people who don't have that have you know, then you're dealing with other negative personality traits that might be narcissistic and all of these other things. So that's kind of where we start from is just that this is a common feeling and you're not alone, and to just continue to work through it. Like at some point you'll be on the other end and not feel unqualified for that. Now you'll be unqualified for the next, you know, next big hurdle and next big goal you have, but you will be perfectly capable to deal with your current situation.
I guess it has to do with feeling resourceful.
Oh, absolutely.
And as you say, there's so much information out there that you can figure out how to do something. I know that in my own case, someone has asked me if I would do something, and I have often, you know, with butterflies in the stomach said, absolutely, I can do that. And then I spend the next, you know, however long reading everything I can get my hands on and studying everything I can possibly study in order to be able to do well at whatever the thing is that I've just said yes to. So there's a certain amount of risk involved.
For sure. And I think no matter what, there is risk. And that's something that I always come back to. So I can live a life where I don't try, I don't reach for those things, I don't take any risk, and that's still a risk. Because then you live this life that is so underneath what you could be capable of, and you miss out on all of these experiences. And so I feel like either way, you're taking a risk. Just what is the reward on the other side, and what would I rather, you know, where would I rather be placing my bets?
So is it better to risk and fail than to not risk at all?
That's my personal philosophy. I would much rather give something a real good go and maybe not make it than to have never given it an opportunity.
Right, because then you end up living with regret.
For sure.
Which is pretty awful.
Right.
So what you had some resources, you learned what you could learn. What about support? Did you have support around you to help you figure this stuff out, even though, I bet there were people that were surprised that you were doing bookkeeping if you'd never done it before.
Oh, for sure. So I think that there's probably nothing more powerful in your growth than a community. So, I mean, one of the things that I was really grateful for was that my employer was super supportive in helping me grow and was willing to invest in me. So every conference that I got to attend, or every industry event I got to attend, I would try to capitalize on that as much as possible. And so trying to ask people or problems that I was dealing with, that would be my goal, is to come out of there hearing how 10 other companies have solved this one problem. And so using a network and being able to ask and not being afraid to be like dumb.
Right.
So I'd say, hey, this may be a dumb question, but we're running into this, and how have you solved this problem? And so that network has been so valuable. I would say that a huge amount of my success came from learning from other people and being vulnerable enough to ask.
I like that you say that. And I think I just read this somewhere as well. And that if someone else can do it, then it can be learned.
For sure. If they can learn it, I can learn it. And I don't even think you have to be a smart person in order for that to apply. I think it's just a matter of hard work. And these are traits that we learn in childhood, right? Like there's so many things that we learn at school, and for some it comes really easy, and others are going to have to work really, really hard to be able to achieve that. But at the end result is that both of those students can leave there knowing how to read, or knowing how to do mathematics, those kind of things. It just might be a lot more work for somebody.
Right. So one of the qualities that you must see when you're hiring people who may not have all of the qualifications, one of the qualities you must see is not only that willingness to learn, but enthusiasm and determination. Is there anything else you notice in people who are willing to risk?
Yeah, I think that they're not afraid to fail and not afraid to look stupid. So, I mean, there's some things that we've tried that haven't gone so well, that haven't worked. And if you can surround yourself with an environment that is a little bit okay with that, like that they celebrate failure to some extent and celebrate, these giving it a good try, even if it's not successful. And, usually the biggest successes come from, something that was originally a failure. And there's so much that you learn from that, and then you tweak it, and suddenly this is something that worked really well.
Do you have a failure that led to a success for you that you'd like to share?
Oh, for sure. So, one of the things that we were really trying to do in our business was to be able to pull better data from our system and get better decision-making capabilities. And in our industry, it was just really, really tough to be able to get data like that we needed. And so we had made this big plan to switch softwares. And I went to my team and just told them up and down how big of a deal this was going to be. And it was going to be a game changer for us. And I was so committed to this project. And so, it was a long process too. If you're getting your entire organization to switch softwares and you're really, really passionate about it and committed, it's going to take some time if you're going to really be using it correctly. So I was just all in on this project and convinced my team to be able to switch the job management system that we were using, and spent weeks learning the system inside and out. Even the onboarding specialist that was with the software company that we were using said, I've never had anybody know this system as well as you, because I was just so committed that this was going to go off awesome. And I had my reputation and everything riding on this. Well, it was a disaster. It
No.
Truly terrible. And so, just trying to get everybody on board with the software switch and then have it go so badly, it was just so demoralizing for me. And I took it personally, So I licked my wounds for a couple of days, and then me and my husband were going on vacation, and I was sitting on the beach, and I started writing a business plan for a job management software for restoration contractors, because I was like, this is crazy that this is what we're dealing with. And, we have better things to do to run our business instead of trying to just deal with technology. So I wrote a business plan for that we were going to start a technology company and a job management platform. And, that was about 2 years ago. And we're just coming out of beta right now, and we're launching this new software. So that was one failure that has led to, us starting another business and bringing it out into the world.
So you saw a need and you figured out on a beach how to fix it.
Yeah.
I attended I guess it was a few years ago now. I was speaking at a conference at one of the local universities here, and I got to attend the rest of the event because I was one of the speakers. And we went to something in the evening that was absolutely fantastic. It was in a bar and in a pub, and it was called a failure wake. And it was a whole bunch of entrepreneurial type people, but not only. There were people who had failures in jobs that they had, and they got up and they had a very short amount of time to tell their failure story, and everyone cheered at the end because it wasn't supposed to be a celebration of the failure. It was a celebration of the attempt and the idea. And then there was the MC made up a poem on the spot for each and every presenter that was just brilliant. And then everyone would toast their glasses, and then the next person would come out. It was the best thing I'd ever been to, and I'd never heard of a failure wake before.
I'm so glad you shared that story. I would really like to attend one of those. So
I thought that it was such a great idea for all, and then to hear, how people sort of got out of it or what they learned from it anyway.
That's incredible. That's really great.
Yeah, I thought that I've loved that idea ever since. And I thought, ooh, at some point I want to create something like that.
Okay, well, I want to be number one on your invite list.
That would be so much fun. So you're vice president now, and do you have further dreams? You're starting. You've got this tech company that you've created. Is the sky the limit for you? Are you continuing on, or is there a point at which, you'll say, okay, I'm here. I've done it.
Well, so I guess there's a lot of reasons why people are driven, but I'm never driven by an end result. So for me, it's the goal and the challenge that's really enticing and exciting. So I don't foresee a point that I'm at where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go, kick my feet up and do, I've made it and going to just take it easy. So the fun part for me is just, that next big goal, that next big dream, and all of the fire that it builds inside of you and the excitement and everything. And then you get into the middle of it and you're like, okay, how am I going to solve these problems? What's going to be my next, and you're dealing with that roller coaster, right? Because there's some really good days and there's some really bad days, where I'm learning now how to run a tech company, and I'm not a tech person. So
You're brave, Rachel. You're brave.
I've had people say that, but I really don't feel like that. I just feel like, again, I feel like you can figure it out. It's not that brave when there is a solution out there. So I figure if I don't know it, I just have to surround myself with some really talented people, and we can kind of work through this together. So that's where I'm at right now is learning how to hire a really amazing development team and how we're going to take this to the next level. So I hope that kind of answers your questions.
I think so. And so tell me, then you just suddenly decided to become an author.
Yeah.
How did that come about? On a beach again?
That wasn't on a beach. That was in a boardroom.
Oh.
So, one of the things that I really felt passionate about was expanding my reach. And so not only in the restoration industry, but in the world in general. And it was interesting because I was running into a lot of conversations with friends and family, like what you just said, where you said, Rachel, you're really brave. And I had a friend, like, she has this big dream, and she, I'm like, well, why don't you go do it? Like, you're uniquely qualified to do this work, and the world needs it. So why don't you go do it? And she's like, oh, Rachel, I'm not you. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not me? Like, I've got nothing special. I'm never the brightest person in the room. I'm never, like, the only thing that I have is the willingness to just give it a go and work hard. So I was just running into a lot of conversations like that, where people were thinking that somebody else had something that they don't have. And I was like, the world needs to know that that's not the case, that people find success, and people who are successful aren't successful because they're really talented. They're really gifted. I really enjoy a podcast that's called How I Built This.
Yes.
And at the very end of every podcast, so what it is these founders who had these wonderful ideas, and they built, these amazing companies and everything like that. And it kind of talks them through their journey. But at the very end, the host asks the question, how much do you attribute to hard work and how much do you attribute to luck? And like the question is never how much do you attribute to just the fact that you're naturally brilliant. Right. Like, is kind of, and I'm like, okay, well, I could fit into one of those categories. I'll work really hard, and hopefully some cards will fall my way, and we'll see where it happens. So that's kind of the reason to write the book, is just I wanted to share the message.
And I think it's a great message, because I've heard people say, and people quite close to me say, oh, somebody's already doing that, or I don't know anything about how to do that. I can't pretend. And I want to say to them, well, wait a minute, you can figure it out. But it's having the energy and having the, I guess resourcefulness is a word that just keeps coming back to me, and the courage to do it. Right.
And the thing about, it's interesting that you say I can't pretend, because I have a chapter in the book that's like fake it till you make it. And that comes with like a really negative connotation. Like you're a snake oil salesman that's trying to sell something that's not really there. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because what you're doing is just getting out there and trying and working until you figure it out. And the guarantee is that you'll figure it out. Like that if you work hard enough and long enough on something, that you'll figure it out and make it successful. And that's really what you're selling is where you're going to go with it, and the ability to do that, because there's so many people that will just give up if or never even start in the first place.
Right. Well, so where can people find out more about you, Rachel?
So you can go to my website. It's Unqualified Tools, TOOLS.com. And there you can get the book, you can also find there's all sorts of exercises to practice some of the things that we just talked about, which is building grit, working on mindset, those kind of things. And I'm on social media as well. Like you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, Unqualified Success.
Fabulous. And do you have one last piece of advice for the Careers by Jenn listener?
Yeah, I would just say, give it a real go. Like, don't let wherever you are right now and your fears and unqualifications hold you back, but just dig in and do the work anyway. And I couldn't be more passionate about like the fact that that's the journey to become an unqualified success.
That's great. Well, thanks for your time today. This has been really great.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.